Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Burgundy and Blue Liner channel. We are here to preview the second round of the playoffs, specifically the Colorado Avalanche versus the Minnesota Wild. Not going to talk as much about the other series as I did before. Really quick before we get into this, I also do have a Substack. If you want to go check that out, I'll put the link in my description down below. I do some writing. That's where I'm doing more of my post-game stuff nowadays. All right, really quick, we're just checking in on the bracket challenge really quick. Looking good in all spots, except for the fact that I thought Dallas would win. I did think it would go 7, so it was pretty much a coin flip for me. I felt like I'm not shocked that Minnesota's here, but that's the only one I missed so far. I did pick Tampa Bay, and I'm not feeling great about that one. I can't lie. They're not playing too great. And I kind of hope Montreal beats them, even if it means I'm wrong and my bracket is destroyed. But otherwise, I feel pretty good. Those Anaheim and those Flyers picks, they came in pretty clutch. They came in pretty clutch and handy. One game off on a lot of these. Thought the other ones would go the distance. They only went 6. Gave the Senators a bit more credit. And gave the Penguins a bit too much credit for sure. So looking pretty good. In terms of second round predictions that I have now for the other ones, we'll get into the Avs in Minnesota. That'll be at the end. But for Vegas, Anaheim, God, I really don't know. Both of these teams are like really, really bad at goaltending, really bad at keeping the puck out of their net. Vegas is a lot better at defending, so that's good. But I think when it comes to like potential, I still buy the Ducks for their goalie, but Dostal has been just not good in these playoffs at all. I thought he was going to play a lot better against Edmonton than he did, but I guess they got the job done. It's not going to be a very different series for Anaheim, although I do think there's going to be a bit more defense. So I think Vegas will pull through, kind of like I've predicted here. Basically, this is just saying, oh, do I still agree? Because I've gotten most of these. Buffalo versus Tampa. I don't know. Buffalo looked pretty solid, and Tampa has not looked great. If it's Buffalo versus Montreal, I feel very confident about Buffalo. Although Montreal's looked good. I think Buffalo's goaltending has been a bit more solid. Alex Lyon has looked pretty sharp back there. Jacob Dobish has been he's lucky that he has not cost them the series yet. And then Carolina, Philadelphia. Philadelphia really put their hearts into it to beat Pittsburgh in the Battle of Pennsylvania. I just don't think they have it to compete with Carolina. So really, I think I'm mostly sticking with my guns, except for I think Buffalo's making the conference final. They're a pretty legit team. I wasn't sure how they would take their first playoff experience, but they look pretty good. They look quite nice. Bowen Byram, dude, that guy knows how to play playoff hockey. Shout out Bo. We Avs fans have seen it firsthand. However, that's all on that. Now we're gonna get into the Avs Wild series, but before kind of we do that, I would want to talk about the takeaways that I have from the Avs King series and some things that are less like, oh, okay, well, like was good, but it's more like, okay, this was good, and this is what needs to happen against Minnesota. Both teams actually, I'm gonna get some takeaways from their first series. So the Avs' biggest takeaway is the defensive game. They really were able to slow the game down, play a defensive-minded game, and I feel like sometimes during this regular season, they did a pretty good job at that. Obviously, they were one of the better teams in the league. You know, they led in the least amount of goals, and that wasn't just like Blackwood and Wedgwood played well, but that wasn't just them standing on their heads, you know? A lot of it was the defense. They were a very good defensive team, as we'll see in a little bit when I get into some of the underlying statistics comparing the two teams, but they really stepped it up in this one. I think that's a big bonus when you're playing a team like Minnesota. Although Dallas did shut down Minnesota pretty well on the defense. It was goaltending that let them down a little bit. So that's really one of those things that we'll get into a little bit later, but that's a big key for the Avs. Where we've seen Minnesota can be limited in their chances, but it's whether or not they'll actually cash in on them. Their conversion rate in that first round was pretty high, but Dallas also had kind of that Carolina Hurricanes style where they would suppress the Wild pretty well, but that when they broke down, they were just giving up free looks. And I don't think Ottinger played great, but a lot of those goals, they were just like guys in on him. And so that's a big thing for the Avs. Don't give up the good ones, you know? You can let them get chances, We kind of saw that against LA. They let them get some chances, but they didn't let them get the super clean AA plus looks. It should be A plus plus, but whatever. So that's a big takeaway. The other one was depth. Wasn't sure how the depth would perform. They were a bit shaky last year. We saw Logan O'Connor start off hot. Saw that last year as well. But then what really got it going was that third line. Nick Waugh, Gabe Landeskog, although he played a little bit with the first line. Even Nazem Kadri chipped in a couple of assists. That bottom six was a big key for the Avs. And they're going to continue to have to be that moving forward, because that's one of the big bonuses of this team, is just the sheer amount of depth that they have. They're such a deep team. They have so many options and so many scoring threats down their lineup. They're not just Nathan MacKinnon and Marty Necas. Really, and that's another kind of takeaway, was like, okay, and maybe not the quite as good categories. Necas and MacKinnon were kind of quiet offensively. A lot of the top six was outside of Artturi Lehkonen and technically Gabe Landeskog, because he was also there. They kind of flip-flopped a little bit. Whatever. However you count that, it's fine. Doesn't really matter. Point is, you need Nathan MacKinnon to be better. You need Marty Necas to be better. You need Val Nichushkin to be a lot better, and I'll talk about that. And you need Brock Nelson to be better. That second line is a whole conversation. However, I think one of the big takeaways is, obviously, it was an underwhelming series overall offensively for those guys. Game 4 kind of showed that they do have, they're still those guys. I mean, Nathan MacKinnon took over. Marty Necas is an interesting conversation that I'm going to have, because he needs to produce, but you really can't complain about a lot of the underlying play that he has. There are certainly some actual production and results problems. He obviously doesn't have a goal yet. Only 2 assists. One of them was on an empty net. However, he was pretty close from making that like 5 points in 4 games. If a few of those posts go in, Nathan MacKinnon, like some guys finish some chances, we're talking about Marty Necas being a point per game player in the playoffs, and it's like, okay, well, maybe he can do it. And I don't think he's incapable of it. It's just, he has to be smarter with the puck, and he has to be a little bit more confident. I think that's one thing that a lot of people have talked about, when they talked about the Olympics, is how good he was. And I'm curious if maybe part of the reason he was so good was because, Czechia is a good hockey playing team. But if you listen to his interviews when they would play against Team Canada, he wasn't expecting much of at all. If he talked like that with the Avs against the Wild, that would not go over well. I mean, it's not like it'd be bad, but it's not like, he knew that there was no competition for Team Canada, right? So when it comes to Necas, those expectations were lower, but in Colorado, those expectations are high. They're like the Team Canada. Hopefully the result is a little bit better than it was for Team Canada, but they're the team to beat, or something, whatever. They're a good team, right? It's not like, oh, Will Czechia was playing with house money and Necas was just kind of letting loose there. So I wonder if that's part of the thing, that's we've seen in his, just in even his tenure with the Avalanche, he's a very confidence-based player. When he's feeling it, oh my God, look out, because that guy flies. He can do anything he wants to. But when he's not feeling it, he doesn't shoot, and he takes away a lot of his threat as a player, especially offensively. I mean, he's not a great defensive player. So he's really got to be more confident, especially in the crucial areas. We saw him in the first, I think part of maybe what did it was in the first game, had a few clean looks, couldn't score, might have rattled him a little bit, and that's what we saw at game 2, the 3-on-1, passes it instead of shooting it. But, he's got to get over it. I think a big game early would be big, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that game 4 offense was pretty big. You got Cale Makar just looks incredible. He looks like the best defenseman in the league. He looked like that against the Kings. He's going to have to look like that against the Wild, especially with the guy who's on the other side of the ice. And there's a lot of good offensive tools there. Devon Toews was really chipping in offensively this series. And that was something that the Avs were lacking a lot of this year. And if he's been very good. Devon Toews has been, I would say, close to his former self, if not about the same, since the Olympic break. That really kind of gave him some confidence and rejuvenated him, and it shows. And it's not just like, it's not just like, oh, well, he's, getting better, with his underlings. He's actually getting results for them as well. So that's a big deal. And then the other thing is, I think, the physicality. This is something that the Avs have never been known for. They've never been known for being a physical team. And Josh Manson, is obviously probably the face of that physicality. But Brent Burns stepped up on the back end too. That guy turned into an animal. And maybe, I can't say I followed him a lot in Carolina. I don't really know. I know he had some pretty rough postseasons, but I don't think he started them as well as he did this year, at least from my understanding. Especially on the defensive side of the puck, I think he was great. Honestly, if Brent Burns is just a lockdown defender, uses that big body to break up plays and everything, I'm more than okay with that. He doesn't need to play offense. They have Cale Makar, Devon Toews, and Sam Malinsky, and honestly, all of their forwards to do that. He doesn't need to do that, If he just wants to shoot pucks, that's fine. Just don't make him stupid. But I think physicality from those guys was big. I think everybody rose to the occasion physically. Cale Makar was bullying dudes. Devon Toews nailed some hits. Sam Malinsky looked pretty sharp. Was really willing to mix it up and use his body. And then even in the forward core, I mean, the Avs got plenty of guys who are going to go in there and make hits, Leckie, Landeskog, Colton, Nichushkin, Nelson. Those guys were using their, and then obviously you got Waugh and O'Connor and Kelly and Drury. And those are all guys that really use their body effectively on the forecheck. A lot of these teams will hit for the sake of hitting. The Avs really do a good job of hitting to separate the guy from the puck. And I think they did that pretty effectively in the first round. Now, physicality is another thing that was a big takeaway for the Wild. They were like trying to bully the Stars, and part of the thing was like tensions got raised pretty high in that. You have kind of a catalyst kind of guy like Jamie Benn. There's not really that kind of player in this series. There are some dudes, obviously Nazem Kadri has a history. Landeskog's done some dumb stuff once in a while. Not really Jamie Benn level. And then, there's also Marcus Foligno. He's had some pretty brutal hits before. Ryan Hartman can be a little bit of a rat sometimes. He's one of those guys who he'll either pretend like he got shot when you touch him, or he'll try and take your head off. There's a big kind of pendulum for that team in this series. So we'll see. The Kings were a very physical team though, so I don't really have issues with how the Avs handle the Wild physicality, as long as it's like in check, right? If the Wild are taking runs at guys trying to hurt dudes, then obviously an issue might arise. But if they're just playing, if they're just hitting, we'll see. I think another thing to take away, kind of going off, of the defensive thing, I kind of mentioned it, was the Wild scored pretty well at 5v5, but they didn't produce very many chances. And this is something I'll talk about really quick here. If we'll move over to this. So this is this is from the playoffs. You'll see all the way at the bottom, scoring chances for percentage, 43% at the bottom for the Wild, 101, which is fourth bottom. Obviously, the lowest is the Los Angeles Kings, who the Avs just played, right? So it's one of those interesting talks where, yes, they limited them very well. The Stars limited the Wild pretty well offensively, and the Avs did the same to the Kings. But the Wild were still able to find a way to fight through that. So, they have a lot of those guys. Matt Boldy is, in particular, I think the name you think of when you think of those kind of those opportunistic scorers. If you give him a look, he's gonna get damn close to scoring at the very least. Matt Boldy has not only been very good this year, but he's also given the Avs some trouble. So that's definitely a guy to watch, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Wallstat was another big one. Now, when you get out a chance like that, you need your goalie to make saves if you're going to win the series. And they won the series, and what happened? Their goalie made some saves. Just going back to this kind of to these numbers, the Minnesota Wild gave up how many expected goals? Where is it? They had 11 expected goals against at 5v5. They give up 4. That is a lot of big saves from your goaltender. Now, this can go one of two ways because obviously goalies get hot. There's not a lot you can do about it. If a goalie gets hot, obviously score goals, but you never know. And Wallstedt looks hot. He's been very good all year, but he's had some slumps. He's still a rookie. Can he take that workload? But they also have a very capable, both of these teams have very capable backups behind their starters. And realistically, if you were to ask at the beginning of the year who would be starting in game one, for each team, they would say they're who's their current backup. But Wallstedt is definitely one of the big keys. We've seen the Avs struggle with scoring on goaltenders. They've been goalied in postseasons before. Grubauer in 2023, Ottinger in the last 2 years, right? A goalie gets hot. The Avs have struggled with it. Especially, they don't have those kind of one-shot scorers unless guys like Brock Nelson and Marty Necas pick up their confidence and start ripping that puck. They're it's on them to get a lot of it done. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But special teams was another big one for the Minnesota Wild. They obviously struggled pretty hard against the Stars penalty kill, the Stars power play. They also weren't great in their power play. It was not the greatest performance of all time from the Wild and special teams. That kind of lines up with their regular season numbers, The Wild were not a great power play team or a great penalty kill team. And we'll get into that in just a minute, but that's something that the Avs can really exploit. It wasn't great for them either. Obviously, the power play was struggling. I think a lot of that was because of Nazem Kadri's broken hand, and he's gotten a week to rest that. We'll see how that plays out. And their penalty kill was actually pretty solid. Really, they only gave up 2 goals because they scored 1 shorthanded and they gave up 2 on the power play, and 2 of those are a 6-on-4. Really, when it comes to the Avs penalty kill, it's more about discipline and when you're taking penalties. You can't take your penalties in an opportunity where the other team could score a goal because that is a damn hard situation for you and your goaltender to be in, and the Avs paid the price for it. Realistically, the Avs penalty kill was very good in that series. The Wild, now that the Wild did clutch up with some big penalty kills, so there's definitely some potential there. But while we're getting into it, let's just start with some raw underlying statistics. There's no such thing as raw underlying statistics, but you get it. Okay, so here we got the 2 teams' cards. We got the Wild on the left, the Avs on the right, courtesy of JFreshHockeyStats.com. Great website, one of the best in hockey. We're going to be using some pretty good ones here, so just prepare yourselves. So you see, big differences. The Wild don't really stand out in anything other than the power play. Now, like I said, their power play was not great against Dallas. It took a step up when Matt Zuccarello was there, but it still wasn't fantastic. But we saw that they're a good power play team. The Avs experienced that as well. So that's going to be the big test for the penalty kill. In the regular season, the Avs struggled hard with the Wild's power play. I'm pretty sure they gave up a power play goal to them, I think, in every game that they played. If I'm not mistaken. There's one that I'm not sure about, but I know they definitely gave up power play goals in a lot of them. So that penalty kill is going to have to come up big. Special teams is a big conversation for this one. Can the Avs power play do what they did in game 4? They found the offense there. Do what they did at the end of the year. We'll see. But then you go down the line. Goals for 17th for the Wild, bottom 50%. Goals against 10, pretty solid. Goal share 14, solid. The middle of the pack. Finishing very low, 23. Big reason for that goals for number being pretty low. Expected goals for 12. So there's definitely some discrepancy there, right? You see, okay, they're getting decent chances, but they're not finishing on all of them. But it's not like they're getting it's not like their expected goals for is 6th or 7th in the leagues. So that's not here to make the joke. They're producing at a good rate, but not a great rate. But they're struggling to finish, which is a Big difference from what we've seen this postseason, which could be one of two things. It could be a regression to the mean for them, or it could be an outlier. We'll see. Expected goals against 14. So you can see there's the pendulum swing the other way. Their defense is fine, but their goaltending is kind of making up for it, pushing them into the top 10. Expected goal shares 10. So they're good. They're a good team. They're a good, well-rounded team. But where we're going to kind of see is they're top-heavy. They're a very top-heavy team. They're very much like the Avs years ago when it was just Rantanen, McKinnon, Landeskog, and then whatever else. They have a good forward core, and like it was better than what the Avs had then. They don't have Gabe Bork playing on their fourth line. They have actual NHL players, but their offense is very limited. There are very limited offensive players in the Wild's depth. So a lot of their scoring comes from those guys. And that's where the finishing conversation comes in, because they got goals out of a decent amount of their depth guys. They got goals from Michael McCarron, and they got goals from Vladimir Tarasenko and these guys. But a lot of them did come from Boldy and Kaprizov and Eriksson Ek and these guys who play at the top of their lineup, right? So that's a big conversation, is the depth in this series. The Avs have invested a lot in their depth this year. And the Wild have invested in their depth, but they haven't invested in like depth scoring per se. They've gotten bigger and meaner in their depth. The Avs have gotten bigger, but they've also gotten more lethal, right? You have Nazem Kadri and Nick Waugh, who can play with some edge. Waugh is a bigger body, but they also have some offensive punch, as we've seen so far in these playoffs. The Wild, we'll see if that depth can keep up. That's a big conversation for this. Shockingly, the Avs goalies it's a little odd that the Avs goalies is like 6th, considering they won the Williams-Jennings, but it is based on expected goals. It's more surprising to me to see the Wild at 9th. I really would have thought they would have been higher. The goaltending has been one of their biggest strengths all year, so that's definitely an interesting one. And like I said, we'll get into the goaltending in a little bit. So we got those out of the way. Now let's get into a few more of these numbers here. Okay, so there's a lot going on here. Don't worry, I'll break it down for you. So we got the heat maps for the Wild on the left, heat maps for the Avs on the right. Okay, so you're going to see in the top left corner, offense. And this is for the regular season. You could tell, kind of like we saw, Minnesota's offense, about average, bang average. A little bit worse, in fact. They're not generating a whole lot. The Avs offense, red hot. They generate a lot. There's the Brent Burns circle, obviously, but a lot of the rest of it is from the middle of the ice. You see the deepest red part right here is close, right in the slot. The Avs have become a much better net front team. And that's a lot of where the Wild success came from too. They were getting tips and screens on Ottinger, and they were getting in the middle of the ice. So there's clearly, that's one of the more red spots from their thing, other than the Stanley Healy one-timer zone, which I would love to know why this is so red. Anyways, they get chances in the middle. That's kind of the thing. They're one of those they're a selective team, right? They don't generate a lot. They're not shooting a lot. They don't generate a lot of looks, but they generate some really good ones. The Avs are a little bit more of, they generate a lot of looks and they generate some pretty good ones. However, they do struggle sometimes to generate those good ones. Sometimes they struggle with simplifying too much or complicating too much. They'll try and make too many passes or too many moves, or they'll just be like, we'll just shoot from the outside and something good will happen. That's something the Avs, when they don't score, that's what the Avs do, and that's what they can't do. They did a pretty good job of that, not doing that against LA. However, some of their top players kind of got into that, and against a good team like Minnesota, who can defend pretty solid, and especially because their goaltending is pretty good, that's where the Avs can struggle. They get in their own heads, and they're like, we need to make these crazy plays just to beat them, right? They can't do that. They have to keep it simple. They have a lot of guys for the net front, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, what we're going to see, finishing is about average. It's about the same for both teams. The only difference is there's the Brent Burns red hot spot is just not there for the Wild. So that's pretty negligible. Then we get to defense. Defense, much better for the Avs than the Wild. However, again, you'll kind of see the Wild will let up quite a few good looks, but they protect that front of the house very well. And so that's where the Avs need to break through. But they do have some space in that slot. They're not a perfect defensive team. Quinn Hughes is a great offensive player. Brock Faber, also very potent offensive player. But Zach Bogosian and Jake Middleton, they're big bodies, but they can struggle with speed and they can struggle to defend sometimes. They're good in their own end, but they're not perfect. Jonas Brodin and Jared Spurgeon are really who they were relying a lot. And Jonas Brodin is questionable for the series, at least to start. So that's a big loss for them defensively. That's one of the bigger differences is that Wild D-Corps has some question marks about their own ability to actually defend, So we'll see how that plays out. Saving, almost the same. Again, very good. And then special teams is where it really stands out. That power play offense is much better for the Wild than it is for the Avs. The Wild get a lot more in front, closer to the net than the Avs do. Now, this might be different for the Avs post-Olympic break. However, we saw they did still struggle to score against the Kings. It wasn't like they were like, okay, it's fine. Like a 20%, even like 20% is like bare minimum. Is like, that's fine. If the Avs can get 20% on the power play, they should be looking pretty good as long as they're penalty killing their 5v5 or up to snuff, which they have been for most of the year. So that's a big, it's kind of the tale of two different things. The Avs have a really good penalty kill against the Wild, who have a very good power play. How can the Avs kind of combat that? This big brown spot, which means the Wild are getting a lot of chances there, is where Kaprizov mostly hangs out. And so that's a big place for the Avs to watch. Right? Obviously, pretty good player. Who'd have thought? Want to defend that guy. I'm sure I'm breaking the bank here. So if the Avs want to hire me, go ahead. Anyways, and then on the other end, you have a very bad penalty kill. It's impressive that their penalty kill is somehow worse than the Avs power play is. Given how bad they were, that's pretty outstanding. They give up a lot in front of the net, and the Avs don't get a lot in front of the net. So it's just kind of like movable force, stoppable force meets movable object. We will see. That's really, honestly, one of the biggest keys to this series can the Avs power play suck less than the Wild's penalty kill? Can they turn it on and take advantage of a penalty kill that has looked bad this postseason? Like, as good as Dallas's power play is, to give up like 30 or 40% on the penalty kill is terrible. That is awful. Like, that is not just Dallas is being good. That is, you are also doing something wrong. So do the Wild adjust? Can the Avs take advantage? Special teams is a big conversation. It has been all year. It's something that the Avs really need. That's really, truthfully, would it be great if Nate just dominated all the time? Yes. But if Nate just literally scored was a point per game and all of his points came on the power play, not a single Avs fan or Avs player would be like, well, this guy sucks. This isn't good. They'd be like, this is great. This is what they need. They need that guy to get going. And if it's on the power play, great. They have plenty of guys who could do the work at 5v5. If he's getting it done when they get the man advantage, fantastic. They need to be taking advantage of the man advantage way more than they did against LA. LA is a very good penalty killing team, though. So there is some of that. Like we said, the Kadri thing. But excuses don't mean jack in the playoffs. You gotta produce. You gotta perform. You gotta be better. They can't. It would be a mind-boggling thing if they can win a Stanley Cup with a power play that continues to score on like one of every like 10 or 11 chances. A 10% power play is not going to cut it if you want to win a cup. It's not going to cut it if you want to make it past the second round. So the Avs need that to step up. A lot of it comes from Necas. He was definitely a little bit passive on that power play in the first round, but a lot of that also was give a shout out to AJ Havely of DNVR. He did a great breakdown on this. You should go check it out, of the Avs power play. But you can kind of see if, and obviously, you know, he's not the only one who saw it. Probably we all have eyes, but he also did a very good job breaking it down, not taking anything away from him. He pointed out how Kadri wouldn't shoot. And so when you have a guy who's the only person on one side of the ice who's not going to shoot, well, you don't care about defending him. So you're going to defend the side of the ice with the three really good shooters and the guys who are very good. So it made it harder for McKinnon, Necas, and Makar to do their jobs on the power play. So that's kind of one of those things. I do think, you know, Landy is good. Kadri is good. I'm not of the frame of mind that either of those guys are set and forget on the power play. I really would like to see Brock Nelson there. Val Nichushkin has also shown very well on the Avs power play in the past, but that's a unit that's also worked pretty well. So we'll see if they can kind of get that going a little bit more. They really can't wait around for 4 games to take Kadri off the first unit, though. If he's struggling to shoot and it's costing the other guys time and space, that needs to be a Brock Nelson swap immediately. Because the Avs need power play goals. Newsflash for you. So, anyways, talking about the season, that's all great. Now we're going to get into this year's. So we've talked about, we have on our left here the playoff numbers, courtesy of Natural Stat Trick. By the way, last charts, Hockey Viz, great stuff. All of these, you should go check them out. Natural Stat Trick is completely free. By the way, the other two you have to pay for. I think it's worth it. A lot of people do. So anyways, we kind of showed here, Wild, scoring chances. Okay, well maybe Dallas is a really good team. Maybe. Then you look over here in the regular season, 49%, 49%. No, okay, where did it go? It's 49% still. I promise. Okay. 49% scoring chances for in the regular season. 50% high danger chances for. Better. Not amazing. But you look at a team like LA, and they had more scoring chances for and high danger chances for than the Wild. Just in raw numbers, in percentages. But also, high danger chances, they had more than the Wild did. I think the Kings are a bit of an underrated team. Obviously, the Avs just swept them. I'm gonna have a hard time convincing anybody that the Kings are an underrated team. However, there's a lot of people who are saying like, oh, well, you know, that was barely a test. The Kings were a better team than I think a lot of people gave them credit for. Their biggest problem was 3v3 overtime. Their process this year was very, very good. The Avs were just a very, very good team. You know, the Kings made life hard on them, but the Avs were also just too much for the Kings to handle. I'm not trying to convince you the Kings are better than the Wild. I'm not an idiot. I'm just saying the Wild have not gone off the charts in terms of their process and everything this year. And where they've kind of come back is a lot of their goaltending. You'll see they shot 9.3%. Save percentage was a little bit lower. It's pretty similar to the Avs. Really, all of their statistics are right in line with how they should be. It's kind of, it's really interesting, you know. I mean, even Dallas is pretty low. Like, they're out of the top 10 in this. So, it's one of those things where just results matter. And this is 5v5. Like I said, the Wild had a very good power play. Both of these teams, you know, whoever was going to win between Dallas and Minnesota obviously ended up being Minnesota. Their power play was going to be a big problem. Speaking of the power play, let's take a look over at the right here. we see the Minnesota Wild four goals for. That's pretty good. That's really solid. 4 goals in 6 games is fine. That's solid. You have the Avs, who have 1 goal. That's not great. Not fantastic. Now, in terms of like actual production and like process and like how many chances they actually created, the Wild are solid. 5 goals. You know, they underperformed a little bit. The Avs, not so great. Granted, they played 2 less games. And, I mean, if we look at the time on ice here, the Avs had 16 minutes of power play time. The Wild had 44. Almost 45. That is a giant discrepancy. By the way, did just want to point this out. Kind of absurd that the Avs had by far the least amount of power play time in the league for the first round of the playoffs. Obviously, you got teams with 6, games, and they're going to get more. I think pace-wise, the Ducks and the Oilers are about around the same, but obviously they're the same series. The Kings, 8 minutes more than the Avs. Get another team, Carolina, Ottawa, way more than the Avs did. Now, that's not like the refs suck thing. Maybe a little bit. I mean, they're one of the best teams in the league. And if you look at their numbers, if you look at their numbers from the playoffs, they were possessing the puck more than almost any other team, which when you possess the puck, that usually leads to penalties. You see they're top in Corsi for, shots for, goals for, scoring chances, high danger chances, percentage. Very good stuff from the Avs. Not so much on the power play. And, they had 9 expected goals for. Yeah, 9 goals for. That's solid. This is what I'm going to get into really quick here. Part of the reason I wanted to bring up these numbers. God damn it. Part of the reason I wanted to bring up these numbers is, obviously part of it, again, these aren't rate adjusted stats. These are raw numbers. These are flat rates, right? The Avs played 2 less games and the Wild went to like 17 overtimes. So these numbers are going to be, they're going to be higher for the Wild. They had more scoring chances for than the Avs did, but they also gave up more because they played more games. Where the Avs really need to kind of step their game up offensively is in terms of the good looks. Now, like I said, part of the reason I brought up this Kings Wild thing with the regular season is because I wanted to highlight that the Kings are a lot better of a defensive team. I think people were like, oh, well, they're not a good team, so that means their defense isn't good. No, their defense is in fact very good. The Kings were a great defensive team in the regular season. The Wild were fine, and we saw those numbers. There is reason to believe the Avs can generate more against the Wild. The Stars got some really good looks on the Wild, but they just couldn't score. The Avs kind of need to replicate that, but with the scoring, right? And where the Avs kind of separate from Dallas is the depth. If this was an Avs versus Stars series preview, I would be talking about how well the Avs depth is better than the Stars. The Stars have a very good top 6 who can compete with the Avs, but the depth is what sets the Avs apart. It's kind of the same thing here, except for the Wild, it's like Kaprizov and Boldy. Their top 6 is fine. The Avs top 6, very good. However, the Avs top 6 didn't produce very good in the first round, and that's what needs to change. And that's where we're getting to our key players here. I'll just start with the Wild. I got Boldy, Hughes, Wallstad, Eriksson, Ek, and Faber. Now that's a lot of guys, right? And they're off the top of their lineup. And none of them are in their depth, like I said. The big thing for Faber and Hughes is they were very good against the Stars, but they got a lot of offensive zone time. We saw a little bit this year. Regular season matchups don't take a lot away from it, but the Avs did pretty well against those two in the regular season. And, when they're at home, the Wild aren't going to be able to shelter them quite as much, right? It's up to the Avs to kind of stop them, but they're going to pose a big threat. A lot of their offense comes from those two. They were their best players. They were some of their best players in that series against Dallas. So the Avs really need to limit them. One. And when it comes to Boldy, like I said before, he's a dangerous player. You just can't give him one thing that the Avs did really well in the first round that they didn't really do, that they struggled with at times this year, was they didn't give up free looks. You can't give up free looks to Matt Boldy. He will make you pay. And the Dallas Stars learned that. He's their best goal scorer. Best goal scorer. Probably in the series. I will say that. I know Nathan MacKinnon just won the Rocket Richard, but Matt Boldy is the best raw goal scorer. Now, what I will say is I think Marty Necas can, I wouldn't say go tit for tat with him, but he can get close. He can get close enough. So if Marty Necas starts ripping the puck and scoring some goals, we've seen him do it. He's a good shooter. That's a big thing for the Avs. If they can get like the Necas or even MacKinnon and Boldy close in goals, that's a great thing for the Avs. Because then they have, the other guys who can step up. Now, really, I don't know. Necas and Boldy is a whole conversation. Nathan MacKinnon is better than Kirill Kaprizov. Nathan MacKinnon needs to be the best player in this series. He was not the best player against the LA Kings. He needs to be the best player in this series. Marty Necas needs to be one of the best players in the series. He was not against the LA Kings. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And when I get to, and really quick before I start going off on the Avs, Eriksson Ek is a big player for the Wild. Can they slow down Nathan MacKinnon? He is their number one center, and he's a big body, and he plays defense well. They're not expecting 3 hours earlier. God damn it. They're not expecting Eriksson Ek to go tit for tat with Nathan MacKinnon on the offensive side of the puck. It's just not going to happen. But what they want is for him to stop Nathan MacKinnon from just going off on offense. So if he can limit MacKinnon and chip in some points, that's exactly what the Wild want. And that's what the Avs can't have happen. And then with Wallstat, he was the reason they won that series. He was a huge player. He shut down the Stars. And like I've said before, the Avs can struggle with hot goaltenders in the playoffs. We've seen it before. They can get in their heads. They can struggle to finish. They don't get the timely goals, whatever. They overthink it. That was their biggest downfall last year. They didn't finish enough of their chances. And it wasn't great for them this series either. They struggled with some finishing, but they also didn't generate as many chances as I think they should have. And I think that they might in this series. They have some definite room to grow on the offensive side of the puck, not just in terms of production, but in terms of process. They need to generate more on Wallstat. They need to get him moving more. They need to get those bodies in front. And that's where I'm going to go to the Avs big players. So literally they're big players, like physically large players. And this is where I'm going to go Brock Nelson and Val Nichushkin as two of the key players. Those are big dudes. They need to get in front of that net and get some of those greasy looks. That was one of the things that line really struggled with. And now, giving them, a break, they didn't produce enough. They need to produce more. They were taking on a lot of defensive matchups. If that line goes to Minnesota or in Colorado, if they, in this series, if they go up against Boldy and Kaprizov and they break even or even just lose by 1 goal, that is perfectly acceptable. That is tremendous. That is perfect from that line. But you really want them to get some offense because the odds of them being able to completely shut them down, not great. And they're going to use them as a shutdown line. Brock Nelson has had an incredibly solid defensive year, like Selke-worthy defensive year. Val Nichushkin has returned to form as a two-way player. However, those guys are really fucking good. They're going to get theirs. Pardon my language. But it's the same thing for Nathan MacKinnon and Marty Necas. They're going to get theirs. You just got to make sure you limit that. And the best way, and then when they get theirs, you want to limit it, obviously, but you also want to get it back, right? And we've seen Brock Nelson and Val Nichushkin are good goal scorers. They can score goals at really good clips. One of the biggest problems for the Avs last year was Brock Nelson wasn't scoring goals against goalies. He didn't score a goal at all last year. Last series, he only scored a goal on an empty net. He needs to be contributing at 5v5, and he needs to be contributing against goalies. He was a 30 goal scorer this year. He cannot dry up in the postseason again. It doesn't have to be just gorgeous snipes or anything like that. He's a good shooter, but he also gets dirty. He's a big body. We've seen it. He can, get grimy, and that's what those two need to do. Nichushkin was pretty quiet offensively against the Kings. He needs to use his big body. The Wild got some big players, and the Avs got some too. And so it's kind of, one of those things. They got to use their big bodies to, rise to the occasion. It's going to be hard for guys like Logan O'Connor and Parker Kelly to win battles in front of the net against Michael McCarron and Jake Middleton and Zach Bogosian, because those are big dudes. But the Avs got big dudes, so that's why they need their big dudes to do the work that big dudes do. They got to get to the net. They got to get some rebounds. That was another big problem for the Avs in that series. They didn't get enough second chance opportunities. Now, granted, the Kings were selling out to block every shot. Might be a little bit different for the Wild. But the Avs need that secondary scoring. They have the tertiary scoring at the bottom six. They need the secondary scoring. They need really their whole top six to step up. And that's where I'm going to also give Marty Necas some pressure here. You really want to see Marty Necas have a big series. It was a solid process series for him. He was top 3 in the Avs in almost any offensive category except for actual points. He produced good chances. He made good looks. He just didn't bury them. And his teammates didn't bury them either. So that's not all on him. The Wild aren't the strongest defensive team in the world. They're not as good of a defensive team as the Kings. They're not going to slow it down quite as much. It's not going to be wide open, but Nate just needs to make do. That's what good players do. You have to create your own space. And he needs to shoot the puck a little bit more. We also saw he's willing to get dirty. He goes to the net front. He'll go forecheck. He's got to keep doing that. But then also on the other side of when he has the puck, he's got to be more willing to shoot and more willing to make some smarter plays. Simple. Keep it simple. Keep it smart. Because the Avs are going to need him, especially on that power play, to produce. The Wild are scoring goals pretty well. The Avs need Necas to fill his role and score alongside with MacKinnon. And not only score alongside MacKinnon, but also set up MacKinnon or Landeskog like we saw him do, right? His skating is a big weapon. He can open that game up for not only himself, but for other players. He just needs to get that confidence. I really think if tomorrow he just goes in there, drops even just 2 points, a goal and an assist, 3 points, whatever, that would do wonders for his confidence. And I think we could really see him open up a little bit more. I think that getting that confidence going is a big thing. And one of the ways he has to do it is keep it simple and shoot the puck. He's a skilled player. He doesn't need to do spinoramos every time. He just needs to do the work. And then kind of countering Hughes and Faber, the Avs need Makar and Taves to just keep doing what they were doing in that first round. They were great. No notes. Just keep doing that. They were locking it down on defense. They were getting the offense going. Combined for 3 goals in 4 games. That's the goods. That is good stuff from your top pairing. That is exactly what you need. And especially against a top pairing that's as offensively inclined as Hughes and Faber, the Avs have been lauded for their defensive production. And, you could really throw Sam Alinsky in here too. He really only had 1 assist in that series. Wouldn't mind of him stepping up a little bit, because that's kind of the thing. The Wild have Faber and Hughes. They don't have a guy like Sam Alinsky who can chip in the points like that. Jared Spurgeon and Jonas Brodin aren't those guys. They'll chip it in, but they're not going to push the play and make the plays that Sam Walensky will. So getting him on the board, getting him some points would be huge. But Makar and Toews just got to keep rolling, and the same goes for Scott Wedgwood. He needs to go toe to toe with Wallstedt. This is the biggest battle of this series. Wallstedt got the series for the Wild against Dallas. Ottinger didn't perform, and it cost him. The Avs cannot have the same happen with Scott Wedgwood or Mackenzie Blackwood if he plays. Whoever the goalie is, Scott Wedgwood right now, obviously he's playing very well. They need that performance to keep going. He's probably not going to keep a 970, but he's got to make the big saves, and he's got to go toe to toe with the goaltender across from him. He can't let in any softies. We saw him let in a pretty brutal one in Game 4, but he also let in nothing else. So if you're going to let in one goal and it's a softie, that's fine as long as it's the only one. And then, there's some other, obviously everybody is important in the playoff run. I think one of the other ones that I would want to shout out in terms of that big body thing is Nick Wall. We saw him produce. He was going to the net. He was finding rebounds. That's exactly what you need to do to beat a hot goaltender. That's what the Avs had to do to beat Anton Forsberg, who is playing very well. Jesper Wallstedt is playing even better than that, so they definitely need that. It's imperative that the Avs go to the net front. I have my keys here. Special teams, net front, and then this one's kind of combined, but it's high danger prevention / goaltending. So special teams, obviously, the Avs need that power play to be better. It goes for the whole thing. They just need to score more goals, and the best chance you have to score goals is on the power play. When you score goals on the power play, it opens the game up at 5v5 and will let them score more goals at 5v5. Net front, kind of the same thing. They need that offense. And the best way to beat a hot goaltender is getting in front of him, finding tips, finding rebounds, making his life difficult, right? We saw he wasn't perfect against those tips and rebounds against the Stars. That was one of their most efficient ways to score. They weren't just beating him cleanly. The Avs are going to have to work for it. And to work for it, you got to be willing to go to those dirty areas to get the job done. That's the work that you got to do. And then in terms of the high danger and goaltending, like I said, the Avs did a really good job at preventing high danger chances against the Kings. They need to be more solid with the puck in their own zone. That was a big way the Kings got a lot of their chances, and the Wild are going to feast on that. The Avs need to not give up the clean looks. They're going to give up some good ones, and that's where they need the goaltending to bail them out. But they need to help their goalies out. They can't just let them be bombarded with high dangers, or they can't be like, oh, well, we're not going to let you see a shot for 5 minutes. Oh, and then the first shot we see is going to be like a 2-on-1 or a breakaway. You got to be better than that. You got to, if they want Wedgwood and Blackwood to go toe to toe with Wallstedt, they need to help their goalies out. And they did a very good job with it in the first round, but they need to keep that going a little bit more. All right. I've talked a lot. There's a lot to say here. I think the Avs, it's a tough series. Minnesota is a good team. They finally made it past the first round for the first time in this course, I guess, history. It's a big deal for them. They're pumped. They're excited. They're a good team. They beat the Stars. The Stars are also a good team. They're no slouches. But the Avs have a leg up in some pretty key areas. And we've seen that can make a difference, I think what really separates it for me is the Avs depth. If the Avs bottom 6, middle 6 can produce even just a marginally better clip than they did, really it kind of comes down to that second line. If everything stays the same, but that second line and that first line can give them a goal more a game, the Avs feel pretty good in this series. If that's at 5v5, if that's on the power play, whatever. A goal or two more a game, perfect. And that's hard. Jesper Wallstedt is very good. But I'm saying that's best case scenario. I still think the Avs have what it takes, even if they play like they did against the Kings. They're going to need to step it up a little bit. Like, I don't think playing it like they did against the Kings is a viable strategy in any way whatsoever. They can't just sit back and like play lockdown defense. They need to turn that defense into a little bit more offense and put the Minnesota on their heels a little bit more. Test Wallstedt a little bit more. But focusing on the defensive side of the puck is clearly their focus for this year, and that's a great place to put it. And if they can do that effectively again, and their depth can rise to the occasion, which we've seen them do incredibly well, I feel confident they can get the job done. Get some revenge for 2014. That was like one of my worst hockey memories. I was there in the frickin' building when Nino Niederreiter scored that. I need vengeance, damn it. I was like 10 years old then. 22 now. Give me my redemption. And that's, you know, you can't keep losing in the first 2 rounds. This team is too good to do that again. Sweeping LA is great. You got your week off. Now you got to put the work in. Now you got to show it. You need Necas to step up. You need Nichushkin to step up. You need Nelson to step up. A lot of guys with N's as their last name need to step up. I don't know. It's just a thing, I guess. And I think they'll raise their game a little bit more. And I think the Avs have what it takes. I think they're going to... Part of me wants to say Avs in 7, just as like a revenge for that Wild, the Wild beating them in 7. You know, Nathan McKinnon and Gabe Landeskog probably remember that. That was their first playoff heartbreak. It was a brutal one. Seeing those two get their redemption would be sweet. Full circle moment. Get the job done. I think the Avs take it in 6 though. Because obviously they never will win a series at home. It's only away. So the Avs in 6 is my guess. I think if the Avs play to their abilities, I think they can get the job done. They have the tools. They've invested in their depth well. It's shown pretty well so far. It just needs to keep going, and they need a few more of those contributions from their top players, and they can get the job done, right? Easier said than done. The work has to be done. But my pick is Avs in 6, and we'll see if it plays out. Like I said, check out my Substack down below. Going to be posting some stuff for post games. Hopefully, still good stuff. Like I did last time, got to keep it nice and positive. Hopefully, we keep those vibes rolling, and the Avs get the job done against the Minnesota Wild. Thank you, everybody, so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe. Ring that bell to stay notified when I upload later, and let's go Avs, baby.